Senator Hanson.
Thank you, Madam Deputy President. The government, in a recently published opinion piece, crowed that since Labor left office in 2010, Australia's population has grown by 1.5 million people. But the Australian Bureau of Statistics reports that since Labor left office, Australia's population has grown by twice that figure at 3.3 million people. The truth is, Australia's population has grown by 3.3 million in just 5 years, and that more than 2 million of these individuals were born overseas. These 2 million individuals include 1 million or so skilled migrants who have arrived on a permanent visa, 1 million or so foreign students with work rights, 87,000 individuals on 457 visas, 63,000 people who have overstayed their visa and are now hiding from the government, and 85,000 people who have permanent visas under our humanitarian entry program. Every one of the 3.3 million individuals added to our population since Labor left office needs water and other essential services. Yet this government has done nothing about water security. Not a single dam has been given the go-ahead since Labor left office. It is reckless and a national disgrace because Australia is the driest continent on earth and prone to severe and prolonged drought. The government and Labor's strategy is to reduce the consumption of water by increasing the price. Let me bring the people's attention to Agenda 21, which was signed with Australia and 176 countries around the world. In Chapter 18, it is their agenda to actually privatise water in countries other than third world nations. I believe the same plan for increased prices and to privatise is lined up for our electricity, and this approach is rejected by One Nation because it affects the most vulnerable in our society. It has been widely reported that Cape Town in South Africa, with a population of 3.7 million people, will run out of water by the 21st of April this year. They say it's a 300-year drought year. The fact is the government in South Africa failed to provide water security. Shortly 2 million people are expected to line up for their allowance of 50 litres of water a day because no water will flow from their taps in Cape Town. We are arrogant if we think it can't happen here in Australia. Australia has the highest population growth of any developed country in the world, at 1.6% a year. In New Zealand, the growth is 1%, but the recently elected Labor government has announced it is cutting back on immigration. The United States at 0.7% and the UK at 0.6% are well below 1%. Here's the problem. The government, which is the Liberal and National parties, and Labor before it, have set annual immigration numbers without a single thought to the end result. Labor relies on votes from ethnic minority enclaves. Labor knows new migrants tend to vote Labor, so they want a large immigration program, no matter the cost to existing citizens. The Liberals pander to foreign-owned multinationals and other big businesses, which benefit from a bigger population size. It is partly huge donations, it is partly outdated ideology, and it is partly detachment from the lives of real Australians. Both the current government and previous Labor use migration to disguise the fact they have no answer to the economic problem that has seen productivity per person in Australia falling since 1990, and with it our standard of living. In Norway, payments for their oil and gas have gone into a sovereign wealth fund, which effectively makes every Norwegian a millionaire. But in Australia, we have received little benefit from our gas reserves because this government thinks it's okay for foreign-owned multinationals to take our gas without paying for it and to pay no corporate income tax on the profits made from our gas. It's a national disgrace that we do not get royalties paid on the vast majority of gas taken from Commonwealth water, and that we allow foreign-owned multinationals to lock up our gas and oil until it suits them to sell it at a profit. One Nation's policy is that companies with retention leases over 10 years will be subject to a use-it-or-lose-it policy. I know there are Australian companies who will create jobs that are willing to put some of these leases into production. The current government is timid and frightened of multinationals. Labor is timid and frightened of multinationals. In the past 10 years, 2 out of every 3 people added to Australia's population was born overseas. This level of migration exceeds our ability to cope. We know that because we are experiencing problems directly linked to excessive migration, including rising water, electricity and gas prices, lack of public transport and stress on our education and medical services. Housing prices in the major cities have surged, meaning that fewer Australians own their own home. If most Australians don't benefit from these excessively high levels of immigration, then we have to ask the question, who benefits from high numbers of immigration? The answer: big business and morally bankrupt politicians. Let's be honest, the Liberals, Nationals, and of course I've got to throw the Greens in here, are bereft of any approach to respond to falling productivity other than excessive immigration. Increasingly, we are going into debt to pay for basic services, and one day that debt needs to be repaid. Increasingly, we are in the hands of our creditors. Are we heading down the same path as we have seen Sri Lanka and Greece in losing their ports and airports to their creditors? The level of immigration matters. Let me say that again. The level of immigration matters. The time has come for the government and the opposition to listen to what Australians want in respect of immigration. They are prepared to listen to what Australians had to say on same-sex marriage, but they won't let Australians have a say on immigration numbers. Every survey done for decades has reported Australians want lower immigration numbers. The Scanlon survey, conducted annually for a decade, asked the question, what do you think is the most important problem facing Australia today? In 2017, the issues that worried most Australians were the economy, followed by the quality of government and politicians, and the third issue was immigration. Of course, these 3 issues are interrelated. The Coalition and Labor know Australians want lower immigration, but for their own selfish reasons refuse to act. In October 2017, the Australian Population Research Institute issued its report on voters' views on immigration. They noted there was increased public concern about quality of life and that 74% of voters thought Australia does not need any more people. Voters were worried about growing ethnic diversity. One Nation's immigration policy differs from all other parties because our policy is in the interest of all Australians. Because of my stance on immigration, I have been called racist. It is what happens in Australia when you raise issues some people don't like. As the leader of One Nation, I recognise the invaluable contribution of overseas-born Australians who have enriched Australia by committing to our values, our laws, our political institutions and equality between the sexes. At times during the 1990s, the level of immigration was too high, and there were problems, but the contribution of migrants and their families is undeniable when migrants embrace our way of life and do not come here to change it. We cannot ignore first, second and third generation migrants who violently reject our democratic values and institutions, whatever their ideology. I believe Australia has the right to choose the number and mix of migrants to ensure migration is in the national interest of existing citizens, because the interest of existing citizens comes first. Immigration numbers are too high, and this needs to be addressed, and let the people of Australia have their say.
Thank you, Senator Hanson.